Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. The Hebrew writer in Hebrews chapter 5 begins to touch on a subject that he'll go into in more detail later on, particularly in chapter 7, and that is the topic of the priesthood of Melchizedek. And he mentions it briefly in verse 10 of chapter 5, where he says, called of God and high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And before going into it in more depth, he laments the fact that he didn't feel like his readers were really up to the challenge of really understanding everything that he had to say about Melchizedek. Because he goes on to say, of whom we have many things to say, and hard to be uttered, seeing ye are dull of hearing. For when for the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk, and not of strong meat. For everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So he's saying, look, I want to get into this topic about Melchizedek, but it's going to be kind of hard to do because you guys are still on milk and you haven't moved on to the meat. You're still basically babes when it comes to your understanding of things. And so he encourages them to press on to maturity, and that will go on into chapter 6, where he talks about leaving the principles of the doctrine of Christ. Let us go on unto perfection. And then he goes on. He wants to encourage them. Look, you guys have been on milk too long. It's time to move to meat. You need to mature in your understanding. And in our text today, we can see at least two reasons why he would say they need to be mature, because I think this is very important, because a lot of believers might be of the mindset that, well, as long as I know enough to be saved, as long as I know enough about Jesus, that he died for me and that I need to place my trust in him, and as long as I get enough to know enough to get into heaven, that's all I need to know. Well, the Apostle Paul would say that's not good enough. We need to press on to maturity. And he gives these two reasons, at least these two reasons of why. For one, what's implied here is that when a person moves on to maturity, they're able to learn more. Again, see how he laments the fact that he couldn't really tell them everything he wanted to tell them about Melchizedek. His teaching was limited by their lack of understanding. And it comes out in the text that he's kind of frustrated about that. And that's true. You know, the less you know, the less capacity you have to learn more. But the more you learn, the more your capacity of learning increases, and you're able to learn all the more. And it's true, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. But at the same time, you now know what you don't know, and therefore you can now correct that and learn and begin to learn the things that you don't know. And so maturity opens up the door to more learning. But also maturity keeps us from false teaching. He says in verse 14, he says, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. And there he could be talking about good teachings versus evil teachings or bad teachings. Not to say that it couldn't also be talking about good and evil in the sense of morality. Definitely a person who matures begins to have their senses trained in connection to morality and what is right and what is wrong. But there's also a sense in which once you mature to a certain extent, you then begin to be able to discern between good and evil teachings. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and starting in verse 19, it says, quench not the spirit, despise not prophesying, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, abstain from all appearance of evil. And there he's saying, don't despise people who prophesy. Back then there was people prophesying, and there were some people who were prophesying good things and right things, but then there was others who were not prophesying things that were good. And you can understand that perhaps back then they would get very frustrated, not knowing who to listen to. But he's saying, don't despise prophesying, but prove those things. Hold fast to that which is good. In other words, listen to what they had to say and hold on to the good things and let go of the bad things. In other words, you need to be able to discern between the good and the evil, and to hold on to the good and dispense with that which is evil. And this comes from maturity and understanding things on a deeper level. In Ephesians chapter 4, we're encouraged to press on to this maturity, and God has given us everything that we need to go on to maturity. He's given us apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. He says, for the perfecting of the saints, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men, and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. So maturity protects us from false teaching and helps us not to be led astray. So we need to press on to maturity. And one of the first ways we do that is getting familiar with the Bible. Going through a Bible reading throughout the year, getting yourself familiar with it. Maybe you're not at first going real deep into the text, but just getting familiar with the overall story of the Bible and getting a picture of how everything fits together. And then once you understand everything in a general and broad sense, then you start beginning to look at the more detailed things and seeing how they fit within that overall structure. And then you just keep going down from there until you're able to really dig deep and get into the more fuller understanding of things. And in doing so, again, it helps you to increase your capacity for learning. And it also helps you to be able to discern between good teachings and bad teachings, and also between what is good and bad morally as well. So let's press on to maturity, and let's let our reading in the book of Hebrews inspire us to do so. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.